And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master, now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads!
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, once again bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, this time on a free-to-choose Friday and in partnership with the Washington Examiner. So great to be with you once again. Hope you had a good week and that it is starting to wrap up well. Pleasure and a privilege to be with you as always. Before we jump in to the meat and potatoes of our intellectual meal today, I want to ask you, if you have not done so already, to please subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. That's Jimmy at the Crossroads on YouTube. Also, please do like us on Facebook, Jimmy Sengenberger, media personality, facebook.com/media /Jimmy Sengenberger Pro. And then also follow me on Twitter at Sang Center. That's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. Finally, we started a membership program earlier this week at members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com, or you go to jimmyatthecrossroads.com, the show website, and then at the top you'll see Crossroads Club. Sign up for incredible opportunities to be a participant in what we're doing to help grow along with us. Great perks, including mugs. This one is the mug that we're using on the website. You can get this depending on the level that you choose. Jimmy at the Crossroads official mug on the web, and you can also buy it yourself at the store, shop.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. It's wonderful. You can dishwash it, and it makes my tea even more delicious. So please do sign up, members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. At least check it out, see what we've got going on there. Be sure, please, as well, to follow our friends at the Washington Examiner, washingtonexaminer.com, as well as on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. All right, so it is Free to Choose Friday. We've got a great lineup today as we focus in on the topic of educational freedom and school choice, which is absolutely critical, and we're learning so much more about its value because of this pandemic. So why Free to Choose Friday? Well, a couple reasons. One, human beings, because we are reasoning creatures, are and of right ought to be free to think, free to act, and free to choose. And then, of course, Milton Friedman, the great late economist of the 20th century, he had a book, Free to Choose, and also a television series, and so we do so in part to honor him. And as we like to do on a Free to Choose Friday, let's cue up how he introed his television series back in 1980. I don't think Nathan Matouche, working the Matouche Magic, producer extraordinaire, ever gets enough of that. Just seems so retro and fun to him. Welcome to Free to Choose Friday. Today, we will, in just a few minutes, be joined by Corey DeAngelis of the Reason Foundation, as well as Lindsey Burke of the Heritage Foundation and a scholar at EdChoice. And we're going to be joined by the two of them to delve into the substance of school choice and educational freedom, why it's important, and also what it means for educational outcomes, what it means for competition, what it means for parents being able to make the best choice for what's best in the best interest of their own children. If you're a parent, you know what's best for your kid more than the government, more than a school board, most certainly than a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. So we'll talk about the premise and the value and the economics as well of school choice with Corey DeAngelis and Lindsey Burke today. Then after we chat with them, we're going to get a real-world expose, if you will, of how school choice has impacted parents in this country with the executive director of an organization based down in southern Colorado, in Colorado Springs, called Parents Challenge, that provides scholarships to parents so that their kids can go to any school, including public schools, but any school that they choose. And they help them with that, and they do mentoring, so many different things. So we will get a real-world positive example of the fundamental value of school choice to parents across this country from one organization based down in Colorado Springs. Deborah Hendricks, their executive director of Parents Challenge, will join us. I want to play a clip, though, so you can get an understanding of the value of school choice to parents. And right now, we're hearing a lot of talk about Black Lives Matter, and understandably so. One of the important things is to make sure that we guarantee a good quality education for all Americans, and especially minority students, black students among them, have been oftentimes, well, they've been missing out. They've been missing out on these opportunities. So it is something when you think about the need to provide quality education for those, especially minority communities. Let's play cut 3. Where Milton Friedman talks about the best thing that could help black people in terms of quality education.
In my opinion, there is not a single thing you could do in this world that would do more to improve the condition of the black people who are in the lowest income classes, of the black people who have been most affected by discrimination. There is not anything that you could do that would be more effective than the voucher scheme. Why? Because as I said to you before, and I challenge anybody to deny that there's no respect in which the black in the slum is more deprived than in the quality of schooling he can get. He's much worse off in that respect than he is even in the quality of housing he can get, than in the quality of the automobile he can buy, in the quality of the job he can get with given education. I agree with you that the poor educational qualifications have had further effects carry through life in leading him to have few opportunities to improve his economic conditions. But if we want to improve his economic...
So that was Milton Friedman, 1978, and then here's one particular example that he used to emphasize his point in an exchange back in that year of 1978. This is cut 4, where he talked about a Black Panther-run preschool.
Look at what's happened with those small private schools that have been set up under tremendously difficult circumstances. If I go to the other end of the country, if I go to Oakland, California, there's a small preschool school in the suburbs of Oakland set up by the Black Panthers in California. It's the most effective preschool school that there is around there. It's done a better job than any other of the schools in giving the kids who come to it an opportunity really to get an education. So I'm pleading your case.
There you go. A prime example, 1978. Things have changed quite a bit since then. but it's also still a struggle to provide greater educational freedom and choice for parents and students. We're overdue for a break. In a few minutes, we will be joined by Lindsey Burke of the Heritage Foundation and Corey DeAngelis of the Reason Foundation to talk more about school choice and what it means, its significance, arguments for it, challenging some of the counter-arguments. And then coming up later in the next hour, we will be joined by Deborah Hendricks, who is the Executive Director of Parents Challenge down in Colorado Springs. Keep it right here. You're watching Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And now, the further future adventures of Starship Winkler. In today's episode, the captain is making travel plans.
Sparks, open up a frequency to price expediosity line.
Yes, Captain.
Hello, and welcome to Price Expediosity Line. How can I help you?
Well, I'll need a room.
Are you traveling alone?
Yes.
Oh, that's a shame. Never found the right woman, huh?
Well, there was this... No, wait, just book me a bed.
King, queen, full, twin, Murphy, or bunk.
King. You never know.
Well, as long as you're convinced. All right, name your price.
Name my price?
That's how it works. Name your price.
$6?
$6 it is. Let's plug it in here. Bippity boppity boo. And sorry, you are outbid.
By how much?
Penny. Someone bid 6. Oh, 1.
Who?
Oh boy, I just booked a room for $6.01.
Well, will the captain ever make a good bed bid? Tune in next time when we hear...
Here's one for $602.
I'll take it.
$1,000.
No! Damn dramatic pauses.
On Starship Winkler.
Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics.
Certainly we want to be safe. We want our fellow citizens to be safe. But there is never a time to short-skirt the Bill of Rights.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
Hello, Jimmy. This is President Ronald Reagan, calling from the great beyond on your hotline. It's a different number than the one I used to contact Mr. Gorbachev, but it's no less important, especially at this kind of time. Well, Nancy and I, we stay on the ranch now here in heaven, and we're your biggest fans. We sit out on the porch there, and I'll have my Nancy, bless her heart, she makes me some tea, and we listen to your show, every minute of it. We fully support you in what you're about to accomplish in the future. Nothing but peaceful progress. Some people say, well, what will Jimmy do now? Well, stand by, because you're going to see some real fireworks. This young man has so many great ideas, and so forth. Why, I hate to interrupt, Ronnie, but let me just say this about that. I couldn't agree more with the way that you and Nancy feel about this entire thing. Jackie and I have been observing and listening to the Sengenberger show, and with regards to that, he's on the edge of a new frontier. No looking back, and I declare that by the time this decade is out, he'll have a syndicated show that will spread all the way across the universe. Oh, well, Jimmy, that was Jack Kennedy. He likes to get every word in edgewise. I tease him a lot. He likes to go out on my boat there and tool around on the sailboat. Well, Nancy brings him lemonade. He enjoys it. Yes, we're both, all of us are big fans. Oh, well, Jimmy, it seems that Nancy's ringing that old chuck wagon dinner bell, and it's time to go get all the fixins. coming mother. So we'd just like to say congratulations. Well done. In closing, I'd like to say that if you ever run into an obstacle that seems too big or too daunting, well, I'll say this. Mr. Sengenberger, tear down that wall.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Jimmy at the Crossroads. I tell you, this guy, he could show you the light of the right in the blink of an eye. Here's Jimmy Sengenberger, the host of the Crossroads.
And Nathan Matoush, producer extraordinaire, once again working the Matoush magic, having fun on a Free to Choose Friday here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Pleasure and a privilege to be with you once again today. Thanks so much for joining us. So we are zeroing in today on school choice and the virtues of providing parents with the opportunity to choose the best educational institution for their children. Or maybe it's a homeschool opportunity and they'd rather do it themselves. That's what school choice is about, is making sure that parents have the greatest opportunity, the greatest choice for themselves and their children. Let's dive in to this very topic today with two leading scholars on the issue of educational freedom and school choice. Lindsey Burke is the director of the Center for Education Policy and Will Skillman Fellow in Education at the Heritage Foundation. And Corey DeAngelis is director of the School Choice at the Reason Foundation. In addition, Lindsey is a fellow at EdChoice, which was an organization founded by the Friedmans. And also, Corey DeAngelis is an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute. Welcome to the show to you both. Thanks so much for joining us, and happy Free to Choose Friday.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Great to have you here today on the program, and I want to dive right in, and we'll start with you, Lindsey Burke. What is school choice? What is educational freedom, and why is it important? Very broad question. Let's start there.
Well, it's incredibly important because we know, and I'm sure Corey will touch on this from all of the literature that's out there, when parents are actually able to choose the school that their child attends, the school that's the right fit, all kinds of incredible educational and long-term benefits accrue to those students. And so school choice is really just a process of fit. It is enabling families to select into an education option that matches the unique needs of their child and will ultimately align with their hopes and dreams and desires for their child long term. And so we see it through things like voucher options, tax credit scholarship programs, education savings accounts, charter schools, homeschooling, public school choice, magnet schools. All of that would qualify as what we broadly deem school choice.
Corey DeAngelis, what do you have to add on top of what Lindsey just said? I think that was a pretty good summary.
Yeah, Lindsey is absolutely correct. And the way I would define it is moving towards a system where we're funding students instead of systems. In the current system, we send the money to a residentially assigned government-run school regardless of the satisfaction levels of the customers and regardless of whether the student is actually going to that school. Just think of any other type of taxpayer-funded program that we have. We don't residentially assign people who are on food stamps to government-run grocery stores and force them to take those food stamps there. No, we have the money go to the individual families, and the families get to pick where to take those food stamps. Similarly, with school choice, the funding goes to the individual families, and the families can pick whether they want to go to a government-run school, a private school, or some other type of homeschooling option if they would like.
And so, Lindsey Burke, I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about what the literature shows as far as the benefits of providing parents with the opportunity to choose the best educational establishment institution for their child, whether it is homeschool, or it is private school, or it is traditional public school, or some variation thereof.
Sure. Well, if you look at the rigorous literature on the impact of private school choice on student academic achievement, so it's often what we think about first is how do schools perform vis-a-vis math and reading achievement for the kids who attend. If you look at that body of rigorous research, 10 out of 16 studies find positive benefits for those children. So kids who exercise school choice and were able to select into a private school that their families had chosen. So we see broad positive benefits. We have 4 of those studies that had null effects and 2 that found negative effects of that rigorous research. But those 2 were unique to Louisiana and they were heavily regulated programs. So there's a lot going on there. But overall, on balance, the literature on academic achievement is significant and positive. And then if you look at things like academic attainment, so graduation rates, for instance, college enrollment, we also see broadly that it is positive, significant and positive for students who exercise private school choice. And those are 2 really important measures, attainment and achievement. But importantly, and maybe Corey can talk about this a little bit too, we see it in terms of the outcomes that parents really care about most, I would argue, in some instances, which is number 1, is my child safe? So enabling families to select in a safe school, that's something that choice enables. But also, what does their future long-term life outcome look like? Are they more likely to be volunteers, politically engaged, tolerant of other people's political views? And the literature suggests that, yes, absolutely, that choice improves those outcomes as well.
Again, we're talking with Lindsey Burke of the Heritage Foundation and Corey DeAngelis of the Reason Foundation. So, Corey, going to Lindsey's point, and feel free to add on to anything specific that she was just listing out, but one of the things to me that school choice really does is it provides additional competition into the system, which we wouldn't otherwise see. And as we know from the success of the private sector economy, competition inspires and motivates continual change, continual improvement. You always want to do better as opposed to just staying pat, where if you have no competitive forces at play, why worry about those sorts of things?
Yeah, I just want to add on to what Lindsey said, that a lot of the main benefits of school choice are non-test score outcomes, because families care about a lot more than just the test scores of their children. So when you're looking at things like the criminal activity of the child when they grow up, whether they experience a teenage pregnancy, or even just the reported safety levels in those schools, that those types of outcomes are actually positive as well, because parents know much more about what the needs of their child actually are, and they also care about having their children in a safe place. But you're right that the competitive pressures are also positive as well. And Trump just said this last week. He said something along the lines that school choice creates competition. And this is one of the clearest strands of literature in the school choice debate, that there are 28 studies on the topic of what happens to the children who remain in the traditional public schools. 26 of those 28 studies find statistically significant positive effects on the kids who don't even use the school choice programs. So you can benefit from school choice without even having to switch schools and use the program. And that's exactly right what you said, that it's because the schools know that if they can lose customers, they better change their game so they don't have to shut down.
Yeah, it's fundamentally important to keep in mind that government, unless you introduce market forces, has none of them, and therefore has none of these competitive pressures to improve in that way. Lindsey Burke, when it comes to school choice programs that have been put into effect across the country, either through public programs from the government or through private organizations that provide scholarships, we do have some real-world examples that can demonstrate the value of this kind of approach, don't we?
Yeah, we absolutely do. And I would say that we have gotten to a point in the education choice movement where we've really been able to refine what education choice looks like, refine the mechanisms, and give families a maximum range of options, even beyond just school choice. So we call it education choice now, because you can look at a state like Arizona. Arizona provides education savings accounts, as does Florida, Tennessee, Mississippi, North Carolina, but they provide education savings accounts directly to families. And so in the case of Arizona, if a family qualifies, you get 90% of what the state would have spent on your child in the public school that goes straight into a restricted use account for you, the family. And at that point, you can pay for private school tuition, online learning, special education services and therapies. You can hire private tutors. You can even roll those unused funds over from year to year, and you can roll them into a college savings account. And so that has meant in Arizona and some of these other states that have ESAs in place that a family can completely customize their child's educational experience. They might never even go into a brick and mortar school at all, which, by the way, is really important right now in the moment and time that we're in with the pandemic. That ability to customize and to tailor means families might hire a private tutor, buy curriculum, do some online learning, and craft a completely spot-on education for the needs of their child.
Yeah, and Corey, to Lindsey's point, one of the things that we have seen is just this incredible innovation where now it's not just the one approach of a voucher program, but there are many different ideas to how you can, just at a minimum, give parents more capabilities to choose to access greater amounts of money in order to even improve their public school experience, if not send their child to a private school or switch to homeschooling.
Yeah, it's totally right. And I think Lindsey hit the nail on the head that the future of school choice should actually be called education choice in the form of an education savings account where you get the money following the individual child instead of having it in the form of the voucher, which can only be used for private school tuition and fees. So with education savings account, you can use it on things like tutoring, textbooks, private learning options, and online learning options as well. So it really moves us from the school choice discussion to an education choice discussion. And I also want to point out that another way of thinking about it is kind of like Andrew Yang's universal basic income proposal. I like to call it universal basic education income, because that's essentially what it is. You're providing funding to the families, and the funding can be used for any type of educational expenditure that's approved by the government. And so maybe Andrew Yang will come out in support of education savings accounts if we start calling it universal basic education income.
You know, I think we should find a way to ask him that very question. He just might actually be on board with that sort of proposal. Corey DeAngelis, again, our guest, a fellow at the Reason Foundation, where he is director of school choice, also adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute. Lindsey Burke, our guest, is the director of the Center for Education at the Heritage Foundation, and also a fellow at EdChoice, originally founded, when you trace it back, by Milton and Rose Friedman. And I want to play a clip of the great late Milton Friedman responding to a criticism. This is back in 1980 from his Free to Choose series in Cut 5. This is Milton Friedman responding to some of the criticisms leveled against school choice from a liberal that was on that very program.
The finest schools that you saw in that film were schools that deliberately kept out the most difficult students. Of course you can have a wonderful school if you pick students who are whose parents whose parents are so highly motivated that they're willing to spend more money and willing to go out of their way to do something like that. Now, the public schools have to take the handicap, must provide bilingual education, must engage in busing or other programs in terms of integration, must do all of these things, whereas the private school can come along and say, well, if your child has no problems, you know what we can do? We can offer you a school where you don't have to sit next to a child with these other problems. We're going to put you next to other children who are advantaged.
I think in the real world there is no competition between private schools and public schools, because private schools, especially parochial schools, do not have to comply with federal and state mandates and constitutional limitations and things of that sort.
Dr. Hendricks.
I think the role of public education in a democracy is not akin to that of the marketplace. The purpose for the common school is not the same as the purpose for the marketplace. We are trying in our public schools to create a democracy, to create an educated electorate. If you're going to do that, you have to have the common school.
Okay, I forgot that actually I wanted to have these liberals in 1980 to whom Milton Friedman responded, shown on the screen so that you could both respond to them. Lindsey Burke, you first. Go ahead.
Well,
what are your thoughts?
I mean, I will never respond as whatever Milton Friedman himself had responded as well as he would have responded, but I will give it a shot.
None of us could.
to invoke, what Friedman said, right? And when he wrote his original 1955 essay on the role of government in education, this was where he first really articulated the idea of school choice, of vouchers specifically. And he said, separate the financing of education from the delivery of services, that public education does not require government administration of schooling. And he made that point really forcefully, but it did remain an academic idea for a long time. But now we have seen over the past few decades it work in practice, and everything that you just heard from those folks, the progressives, I guess, at the time in that 1980 film, is completely inaccurate. And I would say the number one reason that is inaccurate is because families are selecting into these options. No one is forcing a family to attend a private school that they do not want to attend. The same cannot be said for our government assignment model of schooling, where we relegate a child to a government-run school based on where their family can afford to buy a home, regardless of whether or not that school is the right fit. And so Friedman would have said, we're breaking housing apart from schooling, and we're actually putting power back in the hands of families to determine for themselves and for their child if a given private school is the right fit, and giving them the financial tools by simply allowing dollars to follow them to pay for that private school tuition. And I'll let Corey weigh in as well, but this idea, one of the gentlemen in that clip said, well, public schools try to infuse democracy and civic values. Well, the operative word there is try, because we know from all of the empirical data that public schools too often are failing on so many important metrics like reading achievement, right? Only a third of students across the country can read proficiently. Fewer than that can do civics and mathematics proficiently. Only 1/3 of Americans across the country today can name a single branch of government. So the onus should be on the government system to say why they should remain entitled to families' dollars, rather than giving families a choice to select into other options.
Corey DeAngelis, please do add on to what Lindsey said, but also when we look at what these gentlemen were saying in the video from 1980. 40 years ago, the arguments were very similar to a lot of the counter-arguments we see to educational choice in the year 2020.
Yeah, educational choice opponents often compare private schooling and school choice to perfection, something that we don't have, which Lindsey very correctly pointed out. The nation's latest report card came out just a couple of weeks ago in civics and geography and U.S. history. Only 15% of kids in the U.S. were proficient in U.S. history, and 3 out of every 4 children were not proficient in civics or geography either. So we don't have this well-educated, democratic populace that they're imagining that we have. But then also school choice benefits the least advantaged more than anyone else. Rich people already have school choice. Rich people can afford to live near the best public schools, and they can already afford to pay out of pocket for private schools. So school choice programs in the form of a voucher and education savings account disproportionately benefits the least advantaged more than anyone else, because their kids are stuck in the worst government schools right now, and they're the least likely to be able to afford to pay for private school tuition out of pocket. So in that sense, school choice is an equalizer. And in practice, if you look at these programs, overwhelmingly they're targeted to the least advantaged based on lower income families, students with special needs, and then students who are in lower performing government run schools. So school choice is an equalizer, and anyone trying to claim the opposite is just not looking at the evidence and not contending with the fact that rich people already have school choice.
Lindsey Burke, one thing that strikes me too about those who oppose the idea of providing parents with greater choice for how to best educate their children, one thing that's striking is that they always presume that you automatically oppose public schools, that say you want to defund public schools in order to provide that kind of experience. I'm a big advocate, especially because I don't see government schools going away, a big advocate of providing a good quality public school education as an option for parents to provide for their students, but also making sure that we pay teachers more. We see administrative costs across the country that have just become absolutely bloated as teacher pay has not even just not risen, but in some cases has even gone down in parts of the country, while administration is getting more and more funding headed in its direction. So talk to us a little bit about this idea, this myth that supporting educational choice means that you oppose public schools and basically want to disenfranchise those who are going to public schools.
Right. So this all comes back to what Friedman originally articulated, which was fund the student and then allow those dollars to flow wherever the family chooses. And so we have to redefine how we think about public education. Public education should be an education available to the public, but we can separate that from this idea of government delivery. So yes, as Friedman said, publicly fund the child, but allow those dollars to follow to any school, public, private, charter, whatever it might be. This administrative bloat point is incredibly important. This is something, there is a lot of data now on administrative bloat. If you go all the way back to 1950, prior to the Great Society, Johnson's Great Society, when we saw massive government intervention in education, there were about 2.36 teachers for every non-teacher in a school district across the country. Fast forward to today, that number is 1 to 1. So that means, on average, in a district, for every teacher you see walking around, there is a non-teaching administrative counterpart. And that's been a huge strain on state budgets. I'll just say quickly, why have we seen what some would argue is maybe mismanagement or at least not good prioritization of spending in districts? It's because they don't have to worry as much about that prioritization. When Friedman wrote that Role of Government in Education essay, he outlined that there are basically 4 ways that you can spend money. And I love this example because I think it works really well for school choice. So Friedman said, you can spend your own money on yourself, you can spend your own money on somebody else, you can spend somebody else's money on yourself, or you can spend somebody else's money on somebody else. That last category is how public schools spend money. It's just how they're designed. They spend somebody else's money, your taxpayer dollars, on somebody else's children. And so there's very little, if any, incentive to economize or to maximize value. School choice options get us much, much closer to spending your own money on your own children. And so that is why not only do they maximize educational opportunity and outcomes, but they help with that dollar allocation as well.
Again, Lindsey Burke is director of the Center for Education Policy at the Heritage Foundation, and Corey DeAngelis is director of the School Choice at the Reason Foundation. And Corey, I want to go with you to one particular criticism that I hear about school choice, and that is the idea that you hold different schools from a government standpoint to different standards. So there are particular standards that public schools must meet in order to get certain funding, access to this and that, so they have standardized testing and so forth. But private schools and homeschooling, those things can be treated differently in certain ways. You also have different licensing requirements for teachers at private schools, even charter schools, than traditional public schools. And so some say you shouldn't give funding from the government, from taxpayers, to those kinds of schools because those teachers and those educational institutions are treated differently. To which you say what to that criticism?
You shouldn't give funding to any schools at all. The funding should go to the individual. No, the funding should go to the person, and the person should be able to choose those government schools if the regulations are actually beneficial, and if standardized testing requirements are actually beneficial, then families will continue to choose those government-run schools. My argument is that while those top-down regulations aren't all that beneficial, maybe we should get rid of some of those regulations that are hampering down the government-run schools and instead hold schools accountable from the bottom up like we do in every other industry by allowing people to vote with their feet. And I also want to add, based on the previous point, that, look, school choice is good for teachers too because it gives individual private, public schools stronger incentives to allocate the money towards the students in the classroom and to raise teacher salaries. If you look at Ben Scafferty's latest report on this, he found that between 1992 and 2014, real inflation-adjusted per-pupil spending in the U.S. has gone up by 27%. Real teacher salaries have actually dropped by 2% in the U.S. Where's all the money going? It's not going to the classroom, and that, I argue, is because the public schools do not have strong incentives to spend the money wisely.
Well, that's for sure. And Corey DeAngelis, I want to add and have you address the fact that when you have the system structured the way that it is, it provides incentives to mismanage those funds, not just disincentives, but from managing it properly, but oftentimes incentives to mismanage. One of the reasons that I think we have a lot of administrative bloat is particularly because there are more federal regulations and standards and tests and all sorts of things that then you have to hire people in order to file the compliance reports and make sure that all the things are met. Yeah. That's a recipe for disaster in many situations.
Well, when a private school underperforms, it shuts down. When a government school underperforms, it gets more money. They can always say, look, we're underperforming because we don't have enough money. The incentive system is completely backwards in the government sector because they can always say that they're failing because they don't have enough money. On the other hand, in the private sector, if you're not performing well, you just either have to shape up or shut down, and that's completely different. And that's one of the main problems.
Yeah, and if I could just give an example to put a finer point on that, if you look at a place like Detroit Public Schools, it is probably one of the, most frustrating examples. Their outcomes, they have a 6% reading proficiency rate, single digits, 6% of their students can read proficiently. And yet they are spending $15,400 per kid. Think about that over the lifetime of the academic lifetime of that child, from kindergarten to graduation. If they graduate, Detroit's spending $200,000 on that student to get a 6% graduation rate. And there is no accountability in place for those outcomes whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. And one thing I want to add is a clip here, real quick, from Kamala Harris, who is in the running to be Vice President of the United States. She was on one of the Sunday shows, I think it was this past Sunday, and this is what she had to say about addressing some racial issues in the country vis-a-vis education.
George, we all witnessed the tragic murder of George Floyd. The people protesting in the streets are protesting what has been a long-standing issue in America that needs to be addressed, and it can be done in a way that does not require us to create fear in people. The reality of it all is this: there needs to be accountability and consequence for anyone who breaks the law and breaks the rules. And so what we're talking about in our package of bills is doing just that. And separately, we really do have to get to a point where we agree that the status quo way of thinking about achieving safety is really wrong when it assumes that the best way to achieve more safety is to put more police on the streets. It's just wrong. You know how you create more safety? You fund public schools, and it wouldn't be the case that in America today 2/3 of our public school teachers come out of their own pocket to help pay for school supplies. The way you create more safety is people have.
So then she goes on to talk about how we need to invest more by spending more on public education. I'd like each of you, starting with Corey DeAngelis, to give a quick response to that idea.
Yeah, the New York Times just gave her a platform a few days ago, I think it was less than a week ago, where she actually made the claim that we have been essentially defunding education for years over the past few decades. That's not true. They should add a clarification statement, because we have each decade increased per pupil expenditures in the U.S., even after adjusting for inflation. Since 1960, we've increased per pupil education expenditures after adjusting for inflation by 280% in America. And in her own home state of California, the increase has been over 100% since 1970 after adjusting for inflation. So we've already thrown more and more money into the system, but we shouldn't expect the results to be any different over time if the money isn't actually being allocated effectively. And as I've said before, if you have a monopoly and you don't have any meaningful incentive to actually allocate those dollars towards your customers in the classroom, well, you're still going to see teachers in the future having to dig into their own pockets to pay for school supplies. And that just highlights that the money is being wasted if you still have teachers not seeing increases in salaries, and if you have teachers having to dig into their own pockets for providing school supplies. That's just showing that the system is not allocating dollars efficiently.
Well, for that op-ed, I think whoever the new opinion editor is at the New York Times should probably be fired for allowing factual inaccuracies to get published on the opinion page. Lindsey Burke, a quick thought?
Well, I would just say quickly that it's interesting to see people on both sides of the aisle say that, hey, all of a sudden special interest groups are blocking accountability. They're applying it to policing at the moment, but it will be interesting to see if these same groups take a more critical eye of teachers' unions, understand that the unions have long been the blocker for accountability with regard to K-12 education. But, I think to just reiterate what Corey said, all of this comes back to how to better allocate resources. It's not about spending more money, it's about who controls those dollars. And until we change that part of the equation to say that it is parents and not some distant government bureaucrat who doesn't even know your child's name, until we empower those families, nothing's going to change.
So final question to both of you, and we'll start with Corey DeAngelis, again, Director of School Choice at the Reason Foundation, and then go to you, Lindsey Burke, Director of Education, the Center for Education Policy at the Heritage Foundation. And that is, the pandemic has really changed a lot of things in terms of how education has been done for the last several months, how educators are looking at doing things next year. What have we learned from the coronavirus pandemic as far as educational opportunities are concerned, and what do you think this tells us for policymakers moving forward? Corey.
Yeah, so we've seen recent polling from Common Sense Media finding that private schools adapted much more quickly than public schools to the pandemic. And as I've said before, I think the reason for this is because they have a competitive pressure to do so. They know that their customers have the ability to walk if they don't adapt to this whole virtual learning environment. And that would mean that they'd have to shut down in the short run and in the long run as well. So this kind of highlights that, again, we should be funding students instead of systems so that students can take that money to the type of school that works best for them, whether it's a public school or a private school. But then also a lot of families are reporting that they want to continue homeschooling next year or provide some type of virtual education for their children. So again, that's just another argument for education savings accounts. The money should go to the family, and if the family's providing that education at home, they should have some of those dollars to help offset those costs of homeschooling. There's no reason why the money should go to the government school if the child isn't being educated in that school. The money should follow the students.
And Lindsey Burke, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say right now, families across the country, everybody's homeschooling. They physically cannot enter the school buildings that their tax dollars are paying for. So they absolutely deserve to be able to control those dollars. They always deserve to be able to control those dollars, but particularly now because they're paying for schools that they literally cannot access. So emergency education savings accounts are really important. But I think just broadly, it shows exactly what Corey said, that we need to make our financing of K-12 education much more nimble. Hopefully this is the last time we'll ever see something like this happen in our lifetimes, a pandemic that shuts down businesses and schools across the country, but it could happen again. There could be other existential threats to the physical school building that happen, or just a family needing some other option, needing to be able to get that flexibility. And so it's really demonstrated the extent to which we need to make those existing dollars more nimble, to be more flexible, to respond to any sort of threat that might happen. Maybe it's a natural disaster, or a school may have to close down again in the fall if it reopens and a significant number of teachers or students are sick. And so making sure that families can quickly access those funds, no matter what happens, will ensure that they have some educational continuity moving forward. And so it's just, I think, highlighted the need for school choice now, immediately, but school choice, education choice being a critically important reform at any time, and a smart reform at any time.
What a great discussion. Very important issue, making sure that parents do have education choice for their children. Lindsey Burke with the Heritage Foundation and Ed Choice. Corey DeAngelis with the Reason Foundation and the Cato Institute. Thank you both so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
And happy Free to Choose Friday. Once again, Lindsey Burke and Corey DeAngelis joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. And really, it is, make no mistake, it is critical that we make sure that kids have the opportunity to go to the best educational institution of their parents' choice. Their parents know who they are and what they need better than some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C., or in some state capital. Not only that, but keep in mind, as we talked about in the segment, just because you say you support school choice and education choice and giving opportunities to parents to make decisions, to be more empowered, does not at all mean that you oppose public schools making sure that teachers get paid well and that opportunity exists. You just want to maximize the chance for parents to access, what was it that Corey put it, universal basic education income, so that they can get their kids into the best educational environment that they may need for their needs. And this pandemic has certainly shown that, and certainly shown some of the benefits of homeschooling and of private schools being able to adapt. We need to empower public schools to make more of these decisions themselves even more effectively. That's what we need to be focusing on, and it does not in any way, shape, or form mean that you don't like teachers or that you don't support funding public schools enough. I certainly do. I have done a lot of work in public K-12 education, running an educational nonprofit over the years. And I've learned a lot about how wonderful teachers really are and why so much of the funding structure is just absolutely out of whack. It is important we address all of these issues in a comprehensive way and maximize educational choice. In a few moments here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, we will be joined by Deborah Hendricks, who is the Executive Director of Parents Challenge, a nonprofit organization in Colorado Springs, Colorado, that provides educational scholarships to parents so their children can go to the best educational environment, including public schools. It's the only program of its kind where we'll get some real-world insights on why school choice and opportunity is so critical to improving the lives of America's young people and their educational quality. Keep it right here. It's Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Don't go anywhere.
You're an entrepreneur.
I'll give you the alternative.
You're an entrepreneur. Sure. You've got to create 30 million jobs over 3 years.
Yeah.
Tell me what companies can do that.
So, first
tell me
of
what
all,
20 or 50 or 100 companies can do that.
I can't tell you a specific companies that can do that because I don't know. In fact,
or investors.
But
what I don't, the greatest investors of
right.
all time.
Well, but I don't presume to think that I know who's going to be the best investor, the best company to do that. Just as I don't think the government is, that I can presume that the government's going to be effective to do that.
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said.
Has been on a determined campaign to convince the world that everything is hunky-dory. And when the government actually spends so much effort trying to convince you of something, you got to be very suspicious.
Your lawyers don't tell you even all the evidence that the government has given them, the few meager disclosures that were made literally at the 11th hour after you'd already been coerced into pleading guilty.
Hours of video evidence of Nancy Pelosi coming up on your porches and jujitsuing your precious packages, while Chuck Schumer waits in the street in the getaway van because he's too afraid to be a man and do his own dirty work.
Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Is it scary that YouTube and Twitter and Facebook have this kind of power over us? Of course it is. But you know what? These things didn't always exist, and they won't always exist. David beat Goliath. The little guy can beat the big guy.
So we have to figure out ways to fight in which we are able to have that kind of reach. We can build our own megaphones. And this is going to this is a little bit of a longer term project. It goes beyond Trump's re-election because it affects every election.
I'm good, man. It's a partnership. We're like this, Jimmy. I got you.
Jimmy, can I tell you that I've done about 200 shows in the last 3 weeks for this book tour? This has been by far my favorite interview.
And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master. Now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of no sense.
Safe, unsafe. Very safe, completely unsafe. Extremely insanely safe. X Games unsafe. Who's there? What do you want?
It's me, Arnold. Donald Trump
I need to ask you a favor. I need you to stop using my quotes and my movie titles in your speeches. When you talk to the public, it gives them the wrong idea that somehow I support you.
I can do whatever I want. I am, after all, Commander-in-Chief.
Ah, that's what I mean right there. You can't just blatantly rip people off. That is a movie that I was in, not you, me.
I can do as I wish, as I totally recall.
See what I mean? That was a great movie I did with Jamie Lee Curtis and James Cameron, and neither one of those two support you, and now you're using that. You can't keep on doing this.
That's
exactly
the media true lie right there.
That's what I mean. You can't say that.
I don't know. Whatever became of us, Arnold? We used to be like brothers, like twins.
That's the last straw. I can't take it anymore. There's something wrong with you. You must have something in your brain.
It's not a tumor.
Ah, that's it. That's it. That's from Kindergarten Cop. You can't steal that.
You know what? You're fired.
You can't fire me. I don't work for you anymore. I quit.
I want you to get Pence on the line right away, Mike Pence. We're going to send him down to Mar-a-Lago, and we're going to put a stop to this Arnold business. Tell him to run. Go. Get to the chopper.
I heard that. Knock it off now, or I'll be back. Unlike you in 2020, I'll be back.
Get him out.
And Crossroad fans, let's welcome back Mr. Sang Style himself, Jimmy Sengenberger.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back. Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner on a Free to Choose Friday, as we are talking about educational choice, educational freedom, all the opportunities that we need to boost for parents to give their children their best shot at a high-quality education. There are a lot of different ways to really go about expanding school choice, expanding educational opportunity for young people. And we'll get to one particular program, a nonprofit program, and how they're approaching this and some real-world examples in just a moment. But first, I want to remind you of the different ways that you can follow, like, subscribe, all those good things to the program. Jimmy at the Crossroads on YouTube. Please subscribe at youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. And like the Facebook page, Jimmy Sengenberger, media personality, facebook.com/Jimmy Sengenberger Pro. And then also you see it right there. Follow me on Twitter at Sang Center. That's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. And then also, please do join up to the exclusive, special, brand new membership program, the Crossroads Club, at members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com, or go to jimmyatthecrossroads.com, where you can, by the way, email me and go up to the top. And right there, you'll see Crossroads Club. Just click that. Great opportunities, so many different perks, exciting things happening. We appreciate you being along for the ride. Also, finally, please do follow our friends and partners at the Washington Examiner as well, WashingtonExaminer.com, and on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So in the last, 30, 40 minutes or so, we had a great conversation with Lindsey Burke and Corey DeAngelis about the value of school choice and some of the public policy benefits. But I want to really paint a real-world picture of why this is such a beneficial thing. It's so incredible in so many ways for students and parents across the country from a real-world standpoint. And to explore a little bit how sometimes educational freedom, educational choice is empowered through nonprofit organizations that have taken leadership roles in doing exactly that, where there are gaps by the government, maybe not implementing some supportive programs such as tax credits or what have you. So I wanted to bring on one leading organization that I know, very familiar with, down in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And of course, I'm broadcasting from Colorado. It's called Parents Challenge. It's got a very unique approach to educational choice, particularly because as it provides scholarships to parents for their students, it is all about giving the full menu of choice, as they say. So it's not just private schools or homeschooling or charter schools. It's also traditional public schools and empowering parents in that regard. So I'm so pleased to welcome here to Jimmy at the Crossroads on a Free to Choose Friday, Deborah Hendricks, who is the Executive Director of Parents Challenge and joins us now. Deborah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is great to have you. Such a pleasure to be able to have a conversation about what you're doing at Parents Challenge and also some of the real-world benefits of what we've been talking about the entire show today. So I want to just ask you first to give us a sense for what Parents Challenge as an organization does and how you approach things, and then we'll delve into some of the various related issues.
Well, great. Well, one of the things is Parents Challenge has been around for 20 years, and our whole focus is to provide low-income families with the full menu of choice, as you just stated. So private, public, charter, and homeschool. And one of the things that we do that is different than other sister partner organizations around the country is that we do provide all choice. But we then also have an accountability component to our program, and that is our parents are required to attend parent empowerment sessions. And these are sessions that are designed based on what parents feel they need to help them to advocate for their children. And then we also require that our parents volunteer in the community because we feel it's important that they learn to give back to the community that is supporting them. So these are really the key aspects of what Parents Challenge provides to families here in the El Paso County area.
And so in terms of the benefits of this type of approach and program, I mean, it really seems that when you offer, as your organization says, the full menu of choice, you're really focusing in on empowering parents to make that best decision. I mean, typically when people say school or education choice, they might think of private schools or home schools or some sort of alternative way that parents can send their kids to school than just the public schools. But you're also saying that there are a lot of parents who would like to send their kids to the public school, but are also struggling at the same time to provide some of the things that they need in going to school.
Correct. So one of the things that we do is with our families, no matter what their choice is, because we have families that might have a child in private school, they may be homeschooling a child, and then they've also sending a child to a traditional public school. And so we don't tell our parents how their child should be educated because that is the parent's decision. They are their child's first teacher. But what we do in that is we provide them with resources and information to help them know how to advocate for their child no matter what their choice is. And in that we can provide mentoring opportunities for them, tutoring opportunities for them, mental health, bullying resources, all types of math resources, reading resources, how to prepare for parent-teacher conferences, things of that nature that help to equip families to know how do I help my child in the educational option that we have chosen for them.
And one more question I want to ask about Parents Challenge. Deborah Hendricks, our guest executive director of Parents Challenge, again, a nonprofit organization in Colorado Springs. That is this one, and then we'll get into broadening the topic, and that is to your point about parents. One of the things that you offer are mentorships and trainings and opportunities for parents to learn particular skills that maybe they find themselves lacking, and they say, hey, I want to learn more about this topic or this subject and be able to better help my kid improve when they're at home working on homework or what have you. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So every year we do a focus group. We don't try to determine what parents need. We ask parents, what do you need to equip you to be better at parenting, at advocating for your child, at identifying community resources? And after we do this focus group, we then go out into the community and find resources and bring speakers in to work with our families based on those topics that they have requested. This allows them then to select topics that will help them to better work with their scholars at home, at school, and in the community. And each year, we offer about 30 to 35 of these sessions that our families can select from.
And then you also do things to make sure that there's accountability, so that in the sense that parents have that additional motivation to make sure that in order to keep money coming from Parents Challenge and the support that you've gotten and are giving to parents, that they're doing all the different things that are needed in order to make sure that the program for their child is working to the maximum impact.
Well, one of the things is that we say this is a hand up, not a handout. And therefore, if you take our money, then you have to fulfill your role. And we're going to fulfill our role by asking our donors to continue to support the program. But we then also hold you accountable, and they must attend a minimum of 6 of the empowerment sessions each year. They must volunteer a minimum of 20 hours a year in the community or at their school of choice.
Love it.
And then they must, at the end of every semester, provide us a parent-student journal. And this journal provides us an idea of what have you done with your scholar all year long, so that we can determine the resources that are working well and the resources that we need to change or adapt based on the growing needs of our families.
Well, I do want to add, as we go into some of the benefits here of programs like Parents Challenge, that in talking with Steve Schuck, who of course founded Parents Challenge, is on the board of directors, he informed me that Milton Friedman was a personal supporter of Parents Challenge when he was alive, which I just think is a real treat to know, especially given that Friedman was one of the leading advocates for decades of education choice across the country. Again, Deborah Hendricks is our guest, executive director of Parents Challenge, joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Deborah, I want to talk about some of the benefits here. I mean, look, when parents are sending their kids to whatever the educational choice they've made is, so it might be a traditional public school, maybe it's a charter school, could be private school, maybe they decide to be homeschool, whatever it is. I want to get down to sort of the heart of the matter as far as what it means to those parents and those kids as far as the benefits. And I'd love for you to tell us a couple of stories of some of the parents that have participated in Parents Challenge programs that have really felt empowered to make this choice for their kid, whatever it is, and that their student, their child, has been able to improve in the educational outcomes in their lives as a result.
Well, that is certainly a question that is loaded with tons of resources that, as I stated, one of the things we do at the end of every semester is our parents complete a parent-student journal. And we get to hear tons of stories of families saying, I didn't know that I could ask for these types of services at my local school. Or I didn't know that I could go and visit my child's classroom to actually see what's going on in the classroom so I could better support them after school or at home. We have families that are struggling with IEPs, which are individual education plans, and they're saying, I didn't know how to advocate for my child and ask for the types of services that will help them to grow and to not be socially promoted, but to be given the resources to help them be successful. Certainly during this COVID-19 pandemic, oh my goodness, many of our families are saying, we didn't have technology. You guys provided that for our families. We didn't have food, and you guys assisted us in identifying resources in the community where we could get food for our families, where we could get tutoring services. You provide a tutor organization that was able to come in and help because our schools were struggling with providing some of the things we needed. So Jimmy, we have many of our families just don't know where to go. And we don't tell them what resources they have to use. All we do is tell them what resources are available to them and allow them to search them out.
Yeah, one of the things that I know, and you've described this, Parents Challenge works with a lot of lower income individuals, and the challenge there is this idea, oftentimes going to your point about advocating for your child, that you might feel like, hey, I don't have money, I'm not empowered to actually speak up and have a voice in my school that my child is going to, when I should as a parent, but I don't feel confident in that regard. And so it's one of the things that I appreciate about this sense of empowering parents to feel like they can actually go to the teachers, go to the principals, or access different programs and initiatives. And that's on top of something else that I really want to drill in on with you, Deborah Hendricks, and that is the notion of, if you're at a school that just is not fit for your child, you don't feel that your kid is getting either a good quality education, or maybe particular needs are not being met, and you want to choose a different school or educational environment for your child, that is critical. I'd love for you to speak to that and how parents feel when they're given the opportunity to choose a different school, whether that is another public school or it is a private school or some other opportunity.
So one of the things that we really encourage our parents to be is bold and courageous. If a school's not working for you, that doesn't mean that that is a bad school for someone else, but it's just not working for your child. And we encourage our families to search out. So we teach them how to find other schools that will meet the needs of their particular scholar, because one size does not fit all. And in that, we have many of our families will go and visit schools. We tell them, you've got to daunt the door of the school. You got to go in and see what's happening in the school, in your child's classroom. And if a school's not working, be bold and find what's going to work for your kid. Why do you want your child to suffer or to stay at a school just because that's where every member of your family has attended, or it's a neighborhood school, or we just don't know where else to go? So we encourage our families on a regular basis, make sure that this is where your child is being successful, and if not, move them. And we have families that make changes at the end of a semester, in between a semester, to make sure that their child is going to be successful. And then we try to come alongside of them and provide additional tools for tutoring and coaching and counseling that will enable that child to be successful and to not fall through the cracks.
And final question for you, Deborah Hendricks, again, Executive Director of Parents Challenge in El Paso County, Colorado, and Colorado Springs. When it comes to school choice and educational choice and empowering parents to be able to make a decision to send their kids to another school or what have you, when you're talking with those parents who have moved their kids to a different school because the opportunity where they were at previously was just not working for them, they needed to go somewhere else, what's the sentiment, what's the sense for those parents when they actually feel empowered to make that choice, have done it, and it's worked out?
Well, some of our families have said, thank you. Thank you for helping us to not maintain the status quo. They have been relieved. Their child, I had a student to come up to me and she said, thank you for not giving up on me. I was struggling. My mom finally removed us from a school that wasn't working. And I thank you guys for not giving up on me because I was drowning. And this was a high schooler. And this young lady never talked in any of the sessions that she attended. She always sat there quiet, never said anything. And for her to make that bold statement and to say, can I give you a hug? Because I am so now excited about the school I'm at. And I am glad that Parents Challenge really, in a sense, encouraged, but maybe even forced my mom to look for alternatives, because now I'm enjoying school.
I think that is a wonderfully positive note to end on, Deborah Hendricks. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to have you on Jimmy at the Crossroads today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And by the way, the website for Parents Challenge is what?
ParentsChallenge.org.
Excellent. Well, keep up the good work. I appreciate you joining us today and appreciate all that you're doing there and everybody across the country who is looking at programs like yours to say, hey, this is what we need to do in our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You as well. Once again, Deborah Hendricks joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, Executive Director of Parents Challenge, which, yes, indeed, did get personal support, financial support from Milton Friedman, which I just think is wonderful, especially here on Free to Choose Friday when we're talking. Let's put him up on the screen one more time since we've been talking. He was a leading advocate, Milton Friedman, of school choice at a time when it wasn't even something people were talking about, something people knew, something people were discussing or even thinking about. 1955, he wrote his first essay, as Lindsey Burke pointed out, from the Heritage Foundation. And he was consistently an advocate because he knew that every child needs to have the best educational opportunity that they possibly can. That's what it's all about in the end. Providing for your children and making sure that they have the best opportunity that they can get to improve their lives. This is the kind of content that we're bringing here on Jimmy at the Crossroads in partnership with the Washington Examiner day in and day out. And we talked about it before, but I recently launched a brand new program just in the past few days called Jimmy's Crossroads Club. And I'm just so excited about this because what we've created is an opportunity for you to be a part of Jimmy at the Crossroads. Joining Jimmy's Crossroads Club, variety of different levels, even business opportunities to join in with your business. So you can get some perks like discounts on the shop for Jimmy at the Crossroads, discounts on new courses I'm going to be offering, special opportunities to involve and get engaged in webinars and what have you. Also, items, chocolate harmonicas perhaps, an engraved harmonica with your name on it, Jimmy at the Crossroads mugs, wine tumblers, and more. So many great little perks in there and other things. Please log on to members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. You see it on the screen there. members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. And sign up. Different levels ranging from $5 to $100 for individuals, and then also there are business opportunities. So please do check it out, members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. Well, that is it for us today here on the program. Such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. My thanks to Lindsey Burke of the Heritage Foundation and EdChoice, to Corey DeAngelis of the Reason Foundation and Cato Institute, to Deborah Hendricks of Parents Challenge, incredible organization in Colorado Springs doing great work, real-world examples we got from her on why this kind of thing, this educational choice, helps parents, empowers them and kids. Make sure that kids get the best education possible. And my thanks to Nathan Matouche, producer extraordinaire, to you for watching and subscribing. YouTube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'll be on 710 KNUS tomorrow night in Denver, 5 to 8 p.m. Mountain Time. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. Thanks to the Washington Examiner as well, and God bless America.